Hello and you're welcome to my channel. Today's tutorial is on the making of the stylish and chic play suits with a band and pockets, and it also has a cross back effect. This is highly beginner friendly and very easy to make. If you're new to my channel, thank you for tuning in. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you for coming back. Now without further ado, let's get right into cutting proper. So I have on my cutting table this fold of fabric, Ankara fabric, and it's on a fold of two. I'm going to be cutting the bottom part of this playsuit first of all. And how I got the fold was a quarter of my hip measurement plus at least 6 inches extra. And then at the bottom here, I just came marked 2 inches for my bending allowance. So from that point there, I'm going to be taking the length of my shirt. So for this playsuit, I'm going to be cutting out the bottom part of the playsuit, which is the pants part of it, first of all. So I have my pants length, okay, and then half of an inch allowance, okay, that I'll be making use of to stitch the pants to the band. So from the initial video, you can see that this playsuit has a band effect. So I'm going to cut this out, so it's the only fabric on my cutting table. Now after cutting this out, from this point here, I'm just marking my waist to my hip measurement, my actual waist to hip measurement, regardless of the fact that it has a 2-inch band. So then from there, I'm also coming down to get my crotch length, which is about 2 inches below my hip line. So just determine what your hip length, hip depth is and what your crotch depth is, and then you mark this out. So now I have my waistline, I have my hip, my crotch, and then the bottom or the hem of my pants. Now on the hip line, I'm going to be taking a quarter of my hip measurements, and that is at about 10.5 inches. I'm going to be adding 1 inch for ease, right? And then I'm also going to be making that same mark at the top here. And then at the crotch line, I'm going to be taking my thigh measurement divided by 2, which is what I'm imputing there, and then I'll add 1 inch for stitching allowance. So I'm just going to connect these lines now. So initially, in making this, actually, I'd wanted to make use of elastics for the waistband. So that was why I took the same measurement I had on my hip on my waistline. Later on, I'm going to be making some corrections. So here, I'm just creating my crotch curve here, which is standard, okay? Now, at this point here, I'm going to be coming down by 1 inch. I'm going to be coming down by 1 inch, and I'm going to be connecting it all the way to the side seam upwards this way, just to eliminate any gaping at the crotch area in the front. Now for the hem, you can decide to take this straight, whatever it is you have on the crotch line, you can decide to take it straight all the way to the hem line. So I have about 14.5 inches, but then I'm going to be taking out half of an inch because I just want it to come in just a little bit. I don't want it too free and I don't want it too fitted. So I'm marking 14 inches there and I'm connecting the lines. And then I can proceed to cutting this out now. However, in cutting, please note that I'm not going to be cutting the curve at the top. I'm not going to be cutting out this part yet because I need it to cut out on the back pattern. So I have my front fabric placed on a fold of Ankara for my back pattern, and just like I said, I thought I was going to be making use of gathers, so I'm not. I'm going to be using normal bands. So I'm going to make some adjustments on the front part of this pants. So I'm taking my actual waist measurements plus 1 inch for stitching allowance, and then I'm just going to connect this all the way to my hip line, and then I'll cut this out. So I have my, and then I'm just going to readjust this slant here, but I'm not cutting this out right away. So I'm going to bring this back and place it on my back fabric so that we can continue. So now for the fold of my back fabric, it's just 2 inches wider towards the crotch area, and then depending on how big you are, 1.5 or 2 inches higher, okay, at the top part of it. So at this point, I'm just going to be coming out by 2 inches. And then I'm going to be going up by 1.5 inch. If you are on the big side or on the bigger side, you can do 2 inches, 2.5. But for me, 1.5 inches is just fine. And then I'll be connecting it back to the side seam of the front, just like I'm doing. Now, after connecting this, I'm now going to continue coming out or extending for the back crotch by 2 inches. So that's 2 inches here, and then for the crotch extension of the back, I'm coming out by 2 inches as well, and then all the way to the hem I'll do 1.5, or you can still retain the 2 inches as you want. So now I'll just proceed to cutting this out. So we're done now, and I can proceed to cutting out the slope for the front. And this is for the front only. And then after this, I'll cut out my pockets and attach to the right side of my pants. And after attaching my pockets, this is what I have, and this is what it looks like. I also joined the front seam, the front crotch together. Now I introduce my back pieces, and then I'm going to place them right sides facing each other. And then I will stitch with 1 inch allowance all the way from this point, and then on the other side I'll do the same thing, 1 inch allowance all the way down. Now I'm done stitching the front to the back pieces, but then I left the back crotch open. As you can see, we have one long piece because I want to take my actual measurements. Now from the front crotch joining, I'm going to be taking half of my waist measurements. So that's half of my waist measurement, which is what I have here. And then I'll locate my hip line. So I'm just trying to make sure that the chalk is visible. And then I'll come down to my hip line, which is about 10 inches away from my waist. So at that point, I'm also going to be taking half of my round waist circumference. And then at this point, you can decide to add some ease, okay, for allowance if you don't want it too fitted. So I'm just going to mark half of my round hip circumference there. And then I'll connect it all the way to the crotch line for the back and extend this marking here. So I'm going to be taking this to my sewing machine to stitch this down because my zipper is not going to be at the back. My zipper will be by the side seam. So I'll stitch down this point. Now I'm done stitching down, okay, and then I have opened up the side seam where I'll be placing my zipper. The next thing to do now is to cut out my band, my waistband. So how you would determine this is to measure out the circumference of what you have all the way from one point all the way to the other point here. So already I have my band cut out, and then if you notice, these bands are individual. It's not like the normal band that we cut on fold. So there are two individual pieces, okay, and this is the full length of my round waist circumference as I have on my trouser or my pants. Now to cut for the top part of this Pinafore Playsuit, I have this fold of fabric. It's on a fold of 2 right now, and it measures about 12.5 inches, 12 inches, and then I folded it again, so it's on a fold of 4. So I'm just marking my start line here because the top of this is not even, so I'm marking my start line there, and then I'm just going to mark below it again half of an inch. That will serve for stitching allowance. The measurement I'm making use of, the length of this pinafore is 10 inches. Please, you can feel free to determine whatever length you want. Okay, but for me 10 inches was just fine. And then the wideness of this is my nipple to nipple measurement, which is 4 inches. I'm going to be adding about 2 inches extra. I'll just make use of the full width of what I have on fold. So that's about 6 inches, and then I'll connect this into a straight line. So you can actually have your pinafore cut out as squared as this, or you can give it any other shape that you want at the top. So this half of an inch is for stitching allowance as well. So at this point, I'm going to be coming in by 1 inch, and then I will just blend it down like I'm doing, because I don't want this pinafore to be all the way squared in shape. So I'll just cut this out. And then opening it up, I have two pieces, one for my main pinafore and then one that would serve as the lining. I'll take this to my sewing machine, and then I will run a stitch of half of an inch from the top there all the way down, and then all the way down as well on this point and at the top. And then I will turn it inside out and give it a good press. Now this is what the pinafore looks like after we have stitched it. And then for the cross back effect, I have two straps here already that I have cut, and then I sewed inside out, and I sewed inside out here, and I've turned it to the right side. The length of this measures 30 inches. Please feel free to determine what length you want. The wideness of this is about 2 inches. So now to place my strap, I'm going to go up about 4 inches and then place it, okay, underneath my pinafore. So you can decide to use you can decide to create button holes, or you can decide to use pins, you know. And then I'm just creating the crossback effect because I want to be sure that I would get my accurate half length for this pinafore. My half length is 17 inches, so I'm just adjusting this to make sure I get 17 inches, with of course half of an inch for stitching this to the band. So measuring this, I have 17.5 inches, which is just perfect. Now we'll continue working on the band. So at this point, I actually had my band cut out 1 inch extra on both sides. Okay, 1 inch allowance extra on both sides. Now at this point, all I'm trying to do is to divide this band into four. I advise that if you want to make this, cut out individual bands for your front and then for your back, instead of having one straight band. Okay, because yeah, it's just easier that way. Then at this point, I'm notching for my center front. So if you cut out one long piece like this is where your center front is going to fall on. Okay, as opposed to if you have individual bands for your front shirts and then for your back shirts. So I'm going to sandwich this in between my band, right sides facing each other. And then I'm going to hold this down with a pin. If you're new to my channel, please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. If you're a returning subscriber, please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. Thank you. So I'm going to create the crossback effect again because I need to sandwich this other part of the pinafore into my band. I have to tuck it in into the band. So I'm going to fold it this way. I've already located my center back. So here I'm just trying to calculate where my center back falls and all. So from that's my center back, and from there to there. Okay, so from one side I'm going to determine where I want to place my cross back. Okay, so I'm just going to, from that side I'm coming out by about 4.5 inches, and that's where I'll place my cross back. And then from this point I'm going to be coming in also by 4.5 inches. That's where I'll place the second cross back. And then also when you are attaching your crossback or when you're stitching, please make sure that you're not stitching it straight. Okay, to eliminate any gaping at your crossback, please make sure that you slant your band or your strap. So you just don't cut it, don't sew it straight, just bring tilt it out a bit, okay, to eliminate any gaping at the back. So I will tilt it this way and hold it down with a pin. I'll do that for the other side, and then I'll run a stitch holding all the pieces together. Now after stitching, yeah, so I'm done stitching. So now I'm going to be fixing the top part to the bottom part. So place them right sides facing each other this way. Don't forget I had 1 inch extra, okay, on my waistband, so I'm going to be marking that, and then I will start to attach from after the 1 inch, and then I'll just hold this down all the way around the waist of it so that I can have an overview of what it's going to look like. So after holding this down, I will run a stitch holding up both pieces together. I will attach my zipper. I will hem the bottom of this short, and then I will weave every loose end. So this is an overview of what it's going to look like. I will do all of those things that I said. And then I will show you what the final outcome looks like. And this is the final outcome of our outfit. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. Till my next video. Bye.